Hi, good morning. I'm just going to take a couple of breaths before I start speaking. I'm just waiting for people to come on. And so go ahead and breathe with me. Take a moment to slow down and feel. This is part of the work, is slowing down. Because when we slow down, we get to feel our bodies, feel into the sensations in our bodies, connect to pleasure, connect to vulnerability and emotion. And emotion is one of the topics we're going to dive into today. And when we slow down, we can also tap into our deeper knowing, our intuition, and our desires. It's all here when we slow down. So yesterday, I talked about basically recognizing and decolonizing internalized systems of oppression, and doing some of the deeper unconscious unearthing through mindset, but also through embodied expression. And today we are diving into day 4, which are the 4 keys to owning your whole and holy power and creating culture through your fierce, authentic expression. All right. I'm showing up today a little bit tender and vulnerable. Just woke up feeling a lot of grief today, and so that's why my energy is just different today than it has been in the last 3 days. So this is where I'm at today. All right, so let's dive right in. The 4 keys. So the first one is emotion. There's emotion, intuition, courage, and imagination. The first one is emotion. So emotion, through the internalization of white culture and systems of oppression, and the systems of oppression it underwrites, we learn to suppress emotion. And we learned this from like day 1. And we learn to suppress emotions, particularly ones that we designate, we put sort of in the bad bucket: anger, shame, fear, and grief, difficult emotions. And some people call them dark or negative emotions, but part of the conditioning is labeling some emotions as good and some as bad. And I don't really think of it that way. I think that of all emotions as experiences, and especially in the women that I serve, which are like the sensitive, empathic women, there's often an over-identification with being spiritual, which is fine if you are, but that this spirituality is associated with needing to be good, which cuts you off from the deeper, more primal emotions we talked about yesterday. The fear, the grief, the rage, the anger. And I'll tell you what's spiritual: being in your goddamn body, having a fully holy human experience, feeling the full range of your emotions, riding and even enjoying, in a sort of strange pleasure, the roller coaster experience of being human. And I say that with such emphasis because I haven't always wanted to be here. And this is not something that I talk about very much, but that I used to be ambivalent about being alive. I used to go into suicidal depressions. 20 years ago, that was my story. And I was like, well, if I live or die, it doesn't make a difference because I don't matter, right? What I say doesn't matter. How I show up doesn't matter. And I've had some some pseudo near-death experiences that have really solidified my desire to be here and to serve. I don't talk about that very much, but it wasn't a near-death experience. I don't talk about it that way, but there were a lot of days that I prayed to God and I bargained with God to keep me here. So I am fully here. And being fully here for me is to feel all my feelings. And that's what I support people with, feeling all their feelings, because every emotion is a portal into the divine, into your own divine. So with regard to feeling emotions, we're designed to feel emotions through our body. We are not designed to hold on to, suppress, or disconnect from these emotions. And when we do, we start to experience depression and anxiety, and sometimes even physical illnesses that, have no specific origin point. And the biggest reason I see for not allowing ourselves to feel emotion is because we fear losing control. We live in a culture, and I'm talking here about Western, white, Anglo-Saxon culture that is really focused on control. We fear being overtaken by feeling. And yet we are an emotional people. I say we because I hold, white culture in my body, white American culture. And that's, an everyday dismantling awareness process. But, this is an emotional culture. We live in an emotional culture, and yet we fear emotion and we fear being overtaken by feeling. And that fear is part of our conditioning. The truth is that your body is designed to allow emotion to flow through you and to live to tell the tale, right? You won't die, even though your nervous system is telling you that you will die if you feel it. So in the same way that animals in the wild don't experience PTSD, it's because they allow this mechanism of fight, flight, and release to move through their bodies. We can do that literally, right? We can have these tremoring and release, but this also happens on the emotional level, where we can allow emotions to move through us, and then they move through, and then we're done with them. So if you experience trauma in your childhood, certain emotions are not expressed and become stuck in the energy system of your body. And there's a good reason for that, because at the time that you experienced it, you didn't have the capacity to allow it to move through, right? It was so threatening and so scary that they became stuck. But what I need you to know today is that what you repressed as a child, because it was so threatening to your survival, and it was probably smart of you to do so, can be felt now. You do have the ego strength to feel it now. Your nervous system will be sounding the alarm, but the truth is that you already survived the worst, and that you can trust that you will continue to be okay, right? If you allow yourself to feel this. Emotions are so wise. Each emotion is an experience and an expression of your humanity. And each portal, like I said earlier, is a portal into some sort of spiritual lesson. Just last night, I'll give you an example. Just last night, I was on a call with a client, and without giving too much detail, there was a movement of some emotion that had not been allowed. And the first experience was, oh my God, like there was a freeze response. Like, I can't actually feel this. Like, I can't allow myself to feel this. So her nervous system was saying, don't do it. It's going to lead to annihilation. It's going to lead to emotional death or abandonment. And then she drew on her higher self intention to be like, no, this is okay. This is a safe space. I think I can feel this. And she began to move the energy, right? Just even moving her arms, saying the words. And then then it got easier. And then a smile broke out on her face and there was pleasure. Oh, this feels fucking good. Yes. And it started to get bigger and more powerful, right? So something that begins as this frozen place, as this forbidden place in the body, in your nervous system, begins to open up more space for pleasure. Got it? All right, you with me? Okay. So it takes courage to move through these emotions, and accessing courage is one of the ways that you own your own power in the process of moving the energy. And when you allow emotions to flow through your body without resisting them, you experience them as simply experience without necessarily attaching a story to them. And often we want to understand, we want to know where it's coming from, and that's fine if you're really into that. I like that too sometimes, but you don't need to do that. That's not a necessary part of the process. You know, a lot of our emotions, a lot of our sensations are nonverbal, right? From really early in our lives. And if you were listening to day 2, we talked about intimacy wounds, early childhood trauma. A lot of that stuff is like, you know, because our capacity for language is limited at ages 0 to 6, we don't necessarily have the capacity to really verbalize or have a specific memory attached, because memory is stored through language. So the point of all of this is that moving through emotions allows you to know yourself intimately, right? In other words, it builds emotional sovereignty. When you know yourself, you own yourself, which is the ultimate power. And when you own yourself, you know what stuff is yours, right? Energetically, you know what belongs to somebody else, which is so important as a space holder, as a leader, a healer, a coach. And especially if you are empathic, you need to know what stuff is yours. When you get triggered, you need to know what piece is mine. Like, oh, something's coming up for me. Is this somebody else's, or is this other person's, or is this mine? You know, because if you've been working as a healer or a coach for some time, you know that there's a total reciprocal process happening between you and the people that you serve. And when you own yourself, you can set better boundaries energetically and emotionally. You can ask for what you need, which is a vital part of pouring from a full cup, serving from a place of fullness. And setting boundaries is essential to protecting your peace. And I'm speaking specifically to the women of color listening to this right now. And so, like I said yesterday, when you own yourself, the system doesn't own you, right? All right, so let me take a pause and have a drink of tea. All right, so key number 2, intuition. Intuition is divine guidance, whether you believe it comes from your spirit guides, nature, from your pussy, from your inner voice, it doesn't matter. It's intuition, right? And as women, we're socialized not to trust our intuition, and we often don't follow it because it's inconvenient. Sometimes following intuition can be disruptive. It can go against what your brain is telling you to do, especially when you're guided to do things that don't make sense to you or that feel risky. For example, your intuition might be telling you to leave your partner or to follow a specific dream, or a dream like leaving your corporate job and going into being a coach, for example, or even moving to another country. You know, and I use my intuition to run my business, run my life, actually. But this is what I mean when I talk about pleasure-based business. I check in with myself around every single move that I make to see if it feels aligned. So I ask for guidance from spirit. I light a candle. I meditate. I walk, and I say, what feels right today? And even when I post on social media, I ask what message needs to come through today. So all of that comes from a deeper intuition. And your inner knowing is never harsh, right? It's, sometimes we hear this voice, this internal voice, and it's telling you something, but sometimes it's harsh. And so I just want to say that your inner knowing is never harsh, and it's always guiding you to what you need for your liberation. And sometimes we confuse intuition with nervous system arousal, right? Like warning signs or, around safety. And so that can, those wires definitely get crossed when you've experienced trauma. So I definitely want to just put that out there. And I want to say also, as you connect with intuition and trust it in small and progressive ways, you become more attuned to it. It gets bigger. You access it more easily. You begin to trust it more, and you begin to trust yourself when you follow it. And the other amazing thing about intuition is that you can use it to heal trapped, stored, stuck emotions in your body, stuck energy in your body. By focusing on sensations in the body and by relating to them from a curious place with a compassionate presence, they can shift and move and release. And I call this relational presencing. It's one of the fundamental practices of the healing that I offer. And I often find that the places in us that feel stuck, they're usually places where we got hurt. And all of that they need is a compassionate presence, right? The energy of presence, and of a presence that isn't judging, that isn't scrutinizing or critical. The energy of presence, the simple observer, the gentle part of yourself, the love that you so freely give to other people, you can turn that inward in that relational presencing. Presence is love in its purest form, and it already lives inside of you. And you can direct that towards yourself, towards the places that feel stuck or that feel frozen or hurt. So you can heal your trauma using the energy of your own love. And that's what I mean when I say that you are the medicine. I really mean that. It's already inside of you. All right, key number 3. Take a drink. All right, so the third key is courage. And of course, it takes courage to feel emotions, to follow intuition, to express your truth. There are so many things we fear happening when we express ourselves authentically, because, like I said, we are not necessarily met, right, in our fullest expression. It's through systems, through family systems, through bigger systems, it's kind of cut, split off. So when we express, or when we think about expressing ourselves authentically, the fears that come up are around being judged, being condemned, being canceled, being ridiculed, being rejected, isolated, or ostracized. And those are, very powerful. Those fears are hooked into our nervous system. So that's why they climb us up, they freeze us up. And I want you to think of courage as a lifelong practice that involves having a friendly and welcoming relationship with vulnerability and fear. So I just want to name that I don't believe in fearlessness. I know that there's a lot of people talking about fearless leaders and all that kind of stuff. And I don't believe in fearlessness. And I invite you to think about fear as something that rides shotgun next to you in whatever car you're riding, whatever adventure you're on. It rides alongside you. It gets to be there. as you're moving forward and expanding your business, perhaps in healing your trauma, or in stepping into your authentic truth or your passion, whatever that is, right? Fear gets to be alongside you. It gets to be there. And ultimately, fear is what stands between you and anything that you desire to do or say or be in your life. It's always some sort of fear. And we need to develop that compassionate relationship with it, knowing that it's going to be alongside us, that we can make a space for it in our journey. And part of the process is knowing exactly what your fears are and seeing them clearly, having a relationship to them. When we know what they are, we can offer the fear that compassionate presence I was talking about a few minutes ago. And only then can you move forward towards what feels right, what feels expansive, and what feels pleasurable to you. Okay, so final key to owning your power. That the fourth and final key is imagination. So when you're stressed, when you're in productivity mode, when you're moving too quickly through your life, we're reacting to our inner landscape, right? Whatever's happening inside of us, and to the outer circumstances of our lives. We're reacting to it from what we already know, right? We're in a pattern, we're in a routine. And we are reactive instead of being responsive. We're repeating old, tried and true, comfortable patterns that aren't comfortable to our spirit, but are just comfortable to our nervous system, right? They're safe, they're comfortable, they're known. But much of what we know, these patterns are based on childhood survival mechanisms, which are the things that I talked about on Tuesday. And what I shared was that these survival patterns are based in trauma and conditioning, including socialization into systems of oppression. And when you don't heal your trauma, that imagination is limited, right? Like when you slow down, you open up your capacity for imagination. In other words, when you live life through your patterns, you're paving the road of the future with the narratives of your past. And I keep repeating that because it's such a powerful metaphor for me. When I heard that for the first time, and I think that Peter Levine of Somatic Experiencing said it, and I was like, boom, yes, that's it. And the fourth key of imagination is so important because imagination is absolutely necessary for you to create a future that you desire, not just the future for your personal life, but the future of the bigger picture, right? Because, I'm talking here to healers and leaders and entrepreneurs that are like really thinking about the bigger picture and the bigger vision about like changing the world, as cheesy as that may sound. But we want to create like a bigger vision of creation. And in order to create, we need to have imagination, to harness the power of our imagination, and to create a future of fierce compassion where people are cared for, a liberated future. So I know that Resmaa Menakem talks about in embodied anti-racism work and decolonization. He said that it's critical to live beyond the white imagination, for example, beyond the imagination of Blackness and whiteness, right? And so when we don't have access to imagination and creativity, we're not able to manifest what is actually possible in our lives, right? I experienced this myself, like just creating from a place of like limitations. Well, okay, this is how far I can go based on what systems are telling me. We create from limitations and scarcity based on our belief systems. And in fact, dreaming is a necessary part of the revolution. And desire is a key part of creation and imagination. We create from what we want to see more of in the world. And for many of us, I say us, women in general, our conditioning has taught us that our desires are dangerous. But truly, I believe that your desires are portals to the divine, right? When we create from passion that is in alignment with your devotion, right? Your heart, whatever you dedicate your life to, it can be the simplest thing. It can just be to your children, right? That's an enormous task just to parent, especially in the times of COVID. Like if that's what you dedicate your life to, right? You can create from the desire to like raise empowered beings. Yeah, so just aligning those desires up with your devotion, lining up your voice, lining up your mindsets. Sometimes connecting to desire can be painful because sometimes there's a gap between what you desire, what you're deeply wanting, you're longing, and where you are right now. And sort of my desire is to support you in bridging that gap. Sometimes trauma, feelings of powerlessness, internalized systems of oppression have us operating from that lack and from that scarcity. And there isn't room to want. Maybe we were taught that, not only wanting was dangerous, but maybe you grew up with really needing to just deal with what you had. So there was, maybe you grew up with real scarcity, or maybe your parents grew up with real scarcity and that was passed down generationally. And so what I want to say is that desire is the magnet that pulls you to your greater vision, whether it's in your finances, inside of like community-based healing, relationships, your entrepreneurship, whatever it is. You have to feel it first. From that feeling, you have to be able to envision it, right? And that pulls you towards it. So I want you to ask yourself on a daily basis, when you wake up in the morning, what do I desire today? What do I want? And sometimes like our wants can seem really superficial. Like, for example, sometimes I want like this really beautiful modern house. And I know I don't need that to be happy, but I kind of fantasize about wanting it. And, when I fantasize and I envision it and I feel into what the feeling is around like peace and harmony. So the deeper desire is not the house, it's the harmony and the peace. So, let the desires be superficial and like wind in a little bit deeper to see what the deeper desire is, right? You wake up in the morning and you ask, what do I want? What do I desire? And so what I was saying earlier that I want to say again is like, so often we make do with what we have, and that's beautiful. It's a beautiful skill to have, especially if you've grown up with actual scarcity, right? If you grew up with immigrant parents, or if you yourself are a migrant or immigrant, right? There's that hustle mentality. There's the making do. And I just want to say that, yes, that's a beautiful skill, and there's more. All right. That's the end of my TED Talk for day 4. This was a shorter day. So the 4 keys, just to summarize, the 4 keys were emotions, intuition, courage, and imagination. And these are sort of the 4 keys around truly owning your whole and holy power as a human being and bringing that into your whatever stirs your pot, whatever drives your passion, and changing the world by just moving from that place. So tomorrow I'm going to share some more details about my Amplifier program that I'm opening up. I'm opening up 5 spaces in my program and I'm really excited about it. So I'm going to talk about it in more detail. And yeah, so join me tomorrow. And I have some exciting offers inside my Amplifier program. So definitely come back tomorrow. Love you all. Thank you so much for being here, and have a wonderful day.